Hey everyone, so I'm going to be focusing on the topic of the decline of attendance rates and ticket sales in different sports organizations out there and different things that they can look at to increase these attendance rates and ticket sales. So, for this topic, I've done a good amount of research on this topic in the past, and it's actually would become one of my favorite topics to look at just because there's so much that goes into it. There are so many different factors that could be attributing to the decline in attendance, but everyone is trying to pinpoint that one thing and find that one thing to finally bring the decline to an end and bring more increases in revenue and just attendance rates in general. Unfortunately, there are so many different causes and probable causes that come with the topic itself. So there may not be that one thing that everybody is looking for, but rather a combination of different things, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, as a class, I'm sure that I can speak for everybody that if you get the chance to go to a live sporting event, many of us would jump at the opportunity to go. Just being that sports have been such a big part of our lives, or whether we've played sports in the past, just whether you've gotten into this major or master because your love of sports. Unfortunately, that's not the case for the vast majority of people out there, and people are starting to stay home more than ever to watch these games that many of us would jump at to go see live and in person. And there are a lot of different things that are attributed to that and why people are starting to think that way. And this presentation is going to show some of these factors and how we can try to combat that, or how organizations can try to change what they're doing to try to solve that issue. So, what's the actual issue? So, over the past decade, many sports organizations have been experiencing large decreases over the years in ticket sales and attendance rates, and they've been noticing less and less people come to their games on a consistent basis. And just for an example, Sports Market Analytics showed from the year 2011 to 2018 that many of these well known sports organizations that we know have seen these significant decreases. So, this is some of the data that they gathered. So, between the year of 2011 and 2018, the MLB showed a 19% decrease in attendance rates. The NFL showed an 8% decrease in attendance rates. The NHL showed a 13% decrease in attendance rates. And interestingly enough, the NCAA also showed large increases, and some of the largest. NCAA basketball showed a 33% decrease, and NCAA football showed a 31% decrease. So these decreases are kind of hard to believe just because these organizations are so well known. I mean, they're all over the place. We see them on TV all the time. Everybody knows who these are, who these organizations are, what sport is played in each organization. So it's kind of interesting to see just how much of a decrease in attendance rates all these organizations are having, and everyone is experiencing it for the most part. So let's look into what some of the main causes are for these rates. And like I said, there are so many different causes that are causing these decreases in attendance rates, but these are some of the ones I found just through some research. For example, there was a researcher named Dr. Lee who performed his research in 2008. He looked at a double-A minor league baseball team, and he handed out surveys in the game that fans could take part in if they wished and turn it in to show some of the answers that they gave. So, for these individuals and some of the research that he found that there were some external factors that played a big role in whether individuals wanted to come back for another game and continue to come back throughout the season. So these external factors ranged from the cleanliness of stadiums, the parking situation at the stadium, and food and beverage services, as well as the prices of these food and beverages. So if fans felt that they didn't have the best experience with these different external factors, chances were that they weren't going to come back for another game. Some more research performed by John Hall from Deakin University, he found that some fans felt that sporting events needed to include fans more and create a better fan experience and just create more fun aspects for fans to experience during the games, just creating a better atmosphere. So when individuals feel like this, oftentimes they aren't going to come back for another game if they felt like they've had a bad experience with all the factors that I previously stated. And I think one of the biggest factors to look at is that when these fans do have this bad experience and they don't come back, they oftentimes just turn to different technologies like streaming services to watch the game and watch any future games that are coming along, just with the sheer convenience and the price that comes with having these technologies. And I think that's one of the biggest things that organizations need to worry about in order to keep their attendance rates increasing or at a steady rate over time. So, when it comes to ticket sales, I think it's really easy to see why people would want to stay home. Just for some averages that I collected within the past year, average ticket prices for some of these major organizations were fairly high for some. And these ticket prices aren't the best seats, and they're not the worst seats by any means. They're just average seats that anybody would probably pick going to these games. So for the average ticket price of the NFL, it was about $93 per person. The MLB was right around $50 per person. The NHL was right around $60 per person. And the NBA was right around $56 per person. So these averages might not seem too high if you're going on your own or maybe just you and a friend. But for the average American family of four, these ticket prices can quickly rack up the price of just admission to get into these games. So with these prices, if you were to average it out for for family of four, the price would be right around $200 plus just to get into the door, and that's not factoring food or beverages that they're going to buy or game memorabilia like a jersey or a hat or even taking part in different raffles like a 50-50. So just with that alone, it's pretty easy to see why someone would want to stay home and save their money instead of spending it at these games where they're going to be spending $300 plus, $400 plus just to have a good time with their family and friends. And I think another thing to really pay attention to is that families who are spending this amount of money, if they get a hold of streaming services or look into streaming services, depending on which one they get, they really only have to pay anywhere from $10 to $45 a month to have this streaming service where they can keep up with their favorite teams, watch all kinds of different sports, watch replays of sports, just be more connected to the team in general than going to the actual stadium itself. And I think this really plays into the new generation coming up. The new generations are being fully immersed into technology, and they don't really know life without the technology that we have today. So, with them being so fully integrated into technology, it's just so much easier for them to be able to navigate these new technologies and streaming services. And it just makes more sense to them to be able to have these services rather than go out of their way to drive up to the stadium and pay the prices and sit in traffic on the way home after the game. So, how can teams combat these issues, especially when you're up against technologies like streaming services? What are different things that they can do to try to bring the fans back into the stadium and out of their homes? So, some of the things that I felt were the biggest factors was number one, starting with making these games more family orientated. Families are such a big part of all sporting events, and much revenue comes from families going to these sporting events. So organizations really have to rely on getting families in and having them have a good time and creating a good atmosphere for them. So, for example, I'm from Chicago, so I'll use the Chicago White Sox as an example. In left field, there's an area called the fundamentals where kids can go up and take part in different things like batting cages, throwing a ball as fast as you can to see if you can set a record. There's even a little wiffle ball field where you can hit a ball off of a tee, and if you hit it over the fence, there's a chance that you can win a prize or get entered into a contest that would lead to a prize. So things like that are things that families look for when going to games, and they look for that extra experience besides the actual game itself, something that kids are going to have a great time at and want to come back and want to continue to take part in these different aspects of the game. So I think that's something that's really big that organizations should really look into. And if they can capitalize on that, um, attendance rates and ticket sales would definitely increase. So another thing to consider would be ticket pricing. Obviously, it's a tough topic for organizations to try to deal with, only because that's where your revenue is coming from. That's where a lot of your revenue is coming from, and it's difficult for an organization to want to reduce the price of their tickets because there's a chance that they may not make as much money as they did compared to the previous year. There's a chance that no one shows up to the game and they end up losing a ton of money. But organizations need to really try to get their ticket prices a little bit lower, or at least offer ticket bundles. And ticket bundles is one of the most important things I think that organizations should offer, especially for families, to try to entice them and get them back into the stadium and out of the comfort of their own homes. So, going back to the Chicago White Sox for another example, this isn't so much as a family bundle, but this is just something that they did to try to get people back into the stadium, being that their record hasn't been the best within the past couple of years. But they put together a bundle where you could buy a $22 ticket for certain games. They selected certain games where they offered this deal. You could buy a $22 ticket and sit in left field in the bleachers right behind the home bullpen. And with the $22 ticket came two free beverages. And if you're over the age of 21, you could use those on alcoholic beverages. And everyone knows that alcoholic beverages at sporting events are extremely expensive. They can be $10 per drink. So this is something that can get individuals back into the game and really interested in coming back with such a great deal. And just going along with the decrease in ticket prices to get people back into stadiums, one of the most interesting things that I found was Noah Garden talking about. He's the MLB's executive vice president of business and sales. So he was talking about how, yes, the MLB has seen a decrease in attendance rates within the past few years, but just last year in 2019, minor league teams actually saw a 2.6% increase in attendance rates and sales. And if anyone has ever been to a minor league team game or event, you would know that ticket prices are way cheaper, and even drinks and food and different things there are so much cheaper than it would be at a major league game. And I think that just goes to show that that's a great example how just better ticket prices and ticket pricing in general, and even pricing in food and drinks, can really draw in a bigger crowd and make them feel like they're getting a better deal for what they're going for. And I think that that was a great example and something that some major league teams should try to implement and in attempt to get people back into the stadium. And finally, one of the biggest factors that I thought was most interesting, but something that organizations are really going to have to pay attention to within the next couple of years, um, and that is the Wi Fi and cellular connectivity within their stadiums. This was something that I didn't really consider just because you would think once you're in the stadium, everyone is in tune to the game and watching the actual game and staying off of their phones. But that's not the case anymore. New generations coming up are more in tune with their technology and using their phones more and more, that having a good Wi-Fi connectivity and cellular connectivity during games is big. I ran into an article by ESPN that talked about how the athletic director of the University of Iowa noticed that the student fan section was looking a little light during a football game, and he actually decided to go outside of the stadium and try to find individuals, real students, and ask them why they hadn't gone to the game or if they had gone to the game at all. And the responses were pretty interesting, as of course the biggest factor was they didn't want to pay for the prices. Even though they are discounted as students, they still have to pay to get in oftentimes at these larger schools. But one of the most interesting factors was that most students that he ran into were saying that the cellular connectivity and the Wi-Fi was so bad in the stadium that they couldn't send a text out to their friends. They couldn't update their social media statuses saying that they were in the game, hanging out with their friends, or show anybody that they were at the game through social media. This was one of the biggest factors that I thought was most interesting. I would have never really thought about an individual worrying about that so much during a game, but it makes all the sense, especially with new generations being immersed in technology so soon. So that's something that organizations are really going to have to worry about. And for example, Michigan State just invested in a $2 million Wi Fi system to put in their football stadium to make sure something like that doesn't happen in the future at their games. So these are just some different factors and different solutions that organizations could look into, and ones that I felt were most important when trying to increase attendance rates. And hopefully, we see some of these organizations start to reverse the decline and see some increases over the years. Thanks for listening to my topic. Can't wait to hear the rest of yours.